Start stream. Okay, yeah, we're live now in YouTube as well.
All right.
Okay, so I'm gonna ahead and start with this. Just give me one sec to present here, and I should be presenting. Ok. Bueno, muy buenos días a todos. Muchas gracias por sintonizarnos. Ahora tenemos un público ahí interesante en varias plataformas, en YouTube y en LinkedIn. Entonces, gracias por unirse y vamos a empezar en corto con el webinar. Lo primero es que voy a hacer una indicación, un anuncio importante. Este webinar lo vamos a realizar en inglés para poder hacer una conversación bastante participativa con nuestro socio comercial 4IR, y vamos a hablar un poco de 4IR y de Eleve, cómo están trabajando juntos. Ahora, antes de que se vayan, ¿verdad? Y es importante mencionar, vamos a agregar una pista de audio completamente en español luego del streaming de esta transmisión. Entonces, más adelante, cuando ustedes, nosotros les notificaremos lo más pronto posible. Cuando hay una pista de audio en español completamente, la van a encontrar en el setup o en la configuración de YouTube en la parte inferior. Sin más, voy a pasar a inglés para darle la bienvenida a nuestros compañeros de 4IR. So I'll start about talking about our webinar title, Elevate the level of your industrial applications using the cloud with NVTech and 4IR solutions, which are guests on our webinar today. I would like to welcome Stranja Sobczyk. I hope that I pronounced that right again.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, and James Bernard, who is CEO on 4IR Solutions, strives the solutions architect, or one of the solutions architects. So I'll let you guys present yourselves a little bit and talk about our joint venture, so to speak, or joint efforts to sell or promote this type of solutions for the industry. So guys, maybe you want to present yourselves perhaps?
Yeah. Thank you, Esteban. First off, I want to start off by thanking you and NVTech for having us on your webinar. It's an honor to be present here and to present to the larger community. I work with manufacturers and integrators to design some of the systems we will cover today as solutions architect with 4IR. Looking forward to hopefully talking about things some of you might have heard of, some of you might have not heard of, and hoping to keep this educational and discuss how we can support your growing digital transformation efforts.
Awesome. And so I'm James Bernard. I'm the CEO and co-founder of 4IR Solutions. Just a little background on what we are as a company is that we have taken what we believe are the best practices from the cloud providers, from inductive automation, and combined all of that into a platform as a service that we call Factory Stack. We work with our partners at NVTech to be able to deliver that solution for folks that are looking to be able to adopt the cloud or are looking to be able to have an ability to securely manage and architect solutions that are in support of their digital transformation and AI needs. We've got some pretty cool capabilities that make that a little bit easier to do. We are Inductive Automation's managed infrastructure partner, so we are the premier technology partner, and what we focus on is delivering infrastructure and all of the groundwork that you need to build applications. So we do work with end users as well as system integrators to help enable these types of solutions that we're going to talk about today. So again, thank you for inviting us, and we're excited to get to share a little bit more about what we do and how 4IR and NVTech brings that capability to the marketplace.
Thanks a lot, guys. Yeah, before I start, I actually wanted to talk about a little bit about NVTech and why we're working with 4IR Solutions. Not only because we really like you guys, we have plenty conversations at the ICC every year in September, now upcoming ICC 2025, which is going to be the first time in Sacramento in a big venue downtown Sacramento. So I wanted to go over that NVTech is a solution provider, a distributor, and representative for inductive automation. And of course, we really value what inductive automation does with its partners, the technology ecosystem that they have right now. And one of the partners is 4IR. So we've been having requests from our customers to how can we deploy or go into the cloud, taking the leverage of what Ignition offers already, the flexibility, the reliability, and all the cool features that Ignition has. And for us, 4IR was one really like a leap forward that allowed us working with them to show customers, hey, this is a way that is easier, and it's a guided way into the cloud without having all the confusion and all the thoughts. So I'll start actually talking about a digital journey into the cloud. So normally when we go into the industry, either if you have a BMS or a SCADA system or a MES system, you go on-prem. That's the classic typical installation, and that's great. At some point, you might want to go with the cloud because you want more flexibility and more resources or more features in your feature set of your installation. So what happens is that you'll have a couple of scenarios, right? Engineering will take the lead role, and will like to do a lot of implementations with its Ignition, hopefully, or other systems. And to grow, you need resources, you need configuration, you need to know a lot of stuff to go into the cloud. And so it can be complex. And you will have also on-prem limitations on database size or storage. So it could be tricky if you want to grow, and the needs for growth are there. There's a lot of industry trying to grow into a cloud with just for the engineering perspective. And now then you can add that management or C-suite corporate can come in and say, hey, guys, we need a digital transformation initiative, or at least this dashboard that we're looking to work with IT and engineering or OT. And so it gets really interesting. Or there are corporations or enterprise customers that are looking for in larger implementations, right? That have several sites. They want to manage everything from a corporate instance, and it can get really big really quickly. So when we're moving forward into those challenges, when we're moving forward into those settings, there are challenges that we face. And those challenges are around these 5 topics: security, infrastructure, recovery, maintenance, and talent. So let's go over those. The first is security, which is a big important factor nowadays. It's stopped being like a nice to have, and nowadays it has to be one of the key elements for a cloud implementation. So your multi-factor authentication, your routing domains, the access, certificates, user management. There's a lot of stuff that you need to go over before you just do the cloud implementation. Then you have your infrastructure that starts with the DNS and the certificate definition or the certificate generation, which is kind of a first brush into it. And then you have performance capabilities, OS systems, health monitoring or management, version control, networking, load balance. So you have a lot of a structure there that you need to navigate and specify before you move into the cloud. There's the disaster recovery, all the backup recovery, not only your applications, but all the infrastructure and instances, like the OS or other things that you might want to save and have a disaster recovery protocol. Of course, the maintenance of the server and the databases or the different data for your setup. And one key element I want to reflect on this, and why this is a key part of why we work with the 4IR. Most of the time, as OT and IT people, we get to get a lot of fun working with PLCs, SCADA system, implementing dashboards for management. So it gets really fun in those parts. But then we don't have enough time to validate all of these challenges or other parts of the system that we don't want to get a hassle from it. So talent is a really important part, and I think 4IR brings in really good people to the mix so we can help you guys with these implementations. So what we want to avoid is you guys feeling like this, right? You feel like the specification for this cloud implementation is going to be huge. There's going to be so much review on the IT part, on the how it works, certificate management, maintenance, everything, right? And you have to have people that know everything. So I wanted to go a little bit over this and tell you guys it doesn't have to be like this. It can be really smooth, really nice, and we can work with you along the way to help you with this. So why go into a cloud? There's a mix today of OT and IT, where IT has a lot of implementations already interesting in ERP systems or other CRM on some other big data sources or implementations that they have. But OT has this big chunk of data that's happening in real time. And for companies, it's essential to get a hold of that data, break it if it's siloed or enclosured, and trying to mix it all together in a good way with IT. So I think it's important to go to the cloud to get some flexibility, some implementation capabilities or more. So we wanted to ask you we wanted to go over how Ignition goes with the cloud. Ignition has a different type of editions for different applications. And you don't have to use all of this for exactly what I'm going to tell, but just so you guys understand that Ignition can solve different parts of the puzzle or your journey as long as you're moving into the cloud. So we have Ignition Edge for critical systems. We have Standard for sites, for a whole plant, which can be used on-premise or on the cloud. And this is really important. Now, if you want something really like an OPEX or a subscription system that has all the benefits on Ignition all together right away with the MQTT and all the great stuff ready for cloud edition is an option as well. So, but normally you can solve everything on the cloud as well with Standard, and this is one thing that a lot of our customers do. So before I jump into to let 4IR talk a little bit, I wanted to reflect on this IT and OT combination with 4IR, and maybe let Stra take the wheel here. Stra, again, thank you for being here, and James. Yeah, I wanted to so you guys can let me just share your screen. Okay. So yeah, so since we understand that Ignition can be positioned in the cloud, but it can feel like a blur or a fog, how do we do this? So can we start with this like typical implementation? Where do you want to start, Stra?
Yeah. You know, I'd like to kind of hammer some of the points you made earlier, which is, you know, why would you go to the cloud, and what are some of the challenges of going to the cloud? So when you think of your traditional systems that you'd be implementing locally and on site, that would include things such as your SCADA platform, your OEE system. So SCADA, when you traditionally is your control for your lines, for your machines. Your OEE is how efficient, how well are you operating? Are you producing? Do you have a lot of waste? How often are you down? And then MES, your manufacturing execution system. So are you taking in your business orders, and are you orchestrating it across your lines? Now, this is traditionally thought of to be something that's on site. As you're expanding, you might want to consider the cloud. So, for instance, you have an enterprise system, you have multiple facilities, or maybe you have fleets. So maybe you're an OEM, and maybe you have multiple machines, and you want to have predictive analytics on them. Or maybe you have an oil and gas facility, and you have a lot of sites that all need data to pull in. So in short, why cloud? It's because you want to standardize your deployments across your facilities, across the resources. You want to centralize your management in one location.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you guys on the chat, or you guys are watching us, if you're already using Ignition or as a BMS or a SCADA into your cloud environment. Have you been planning to do it, working on doing it, or are you figuring out already? I have a SCADA system already, and I have several sites that I can work together with. Are you guys doing that, or let us know in the comments? How are you working with that?
And drop a like.
And drop a like and subscribe. Yes, thank you, Esra.
All right. So another thing I'd like to touch on here is, where we would get involved. So when you think of the business case, that is someone from your team deciding, hey, we want to pursue an OEE project or an MES project or a more complex system, whether that's locally or that's hybrid or it's in the cloud or both locations. We don't typically get involved in telling you need to have an OEE system or you need to have a new SCADA platform. We typically get involved when you start designing it. So whether you're a manufacturer or an integrator, we work with you typically to design the system that can fit best. And our platform, which we'll get to in a second in more detail, helps with the deployment and management of this architecture that we come up with. So in a nutshell, that's where we fit into this overall ecosystem.
Yeah, and maybe I can just add a bit of commentary to that. Is that we recognize that not every application is suitable for the cloud, and as we talk later on in the architectures, we'll talk about hybrid and the use of edge and the intelligent positioning of Ignition where it makes sense for the use case. But what we do find is that there's a lot of things from a data centric perspective, specifically when you're looking at reporting and tying in with enterprise systems. And there's been a maturity of internet connections for a lot of manufacturers and industrial customers at large, where it actually makes sense from a cost perspective, from a user experience perspective, and from just a general architecture perspective to consider cloud either as a part of that architecture or as the primary connection point for individuals that are using the system. A great example is if you have telemetry. So you have, pipelines, or you have some sort of widely dispersed systems that you're collecting data from a lot of different points. There really is no factory or single building or place that's going to make sense for you to say this is the building. So intelligent use of this type of architecture can actually be able to save you money on upfront costs and the purchasing of hardware, as well as the ongoing operational costs of running these systems is typically lower than what it would take to run on-premise systems. And kind of the kind of third part to that is that the architectures are really scalable. So if you think about, if I had to put a server inside of my building, I have to buy a server that's going to be, or a set of servers or infrastructure that's going to be big enough and capable enough for the life cycle of that system. So I'll go buy a bunch of VMware servers or something, and it has to be good for 5 years of capacity and computing. When I purchase my cloud footprint, I purchase what I need today with the knowledge that I can elastically expand what I have over time, that I can add to that architecture as I need more and more. And it's not quite limitless, but for all intents and purposes, you can essentially grow your systems as much as you need to service the business.
That's a great point, James. You know, in the cloud, you're just turning a small dial, and you're not having to go and buy more hardware to match your scale.
Yeah.
I do want to go and touch on, you know, how easy it can be to install an ignition system. It's very, very quick. I think on their site they advertise, you know, 3-minute installation. You might even be able to do it faster than that. And you can have a quick environment up for development purposes. However, to get to a production professional grade environment, there is a lot more that has to happen in the background to ensure that your system is ready for your enterprise. Whether that's two-factor authentication or additional monitoring metrics, a database, you know, potentially other, you know, update services around that, finding appropriate operating systems to match your environment. All of those things need to be taken into account. And Factory Stack, our platform, was built to help bridge the gap between a development system, prototype system, to a production grade enterprise system.
Sorry, if I can just make one comment on the previous slide, Straw.
Yep.
A very specific example off of this page that may sound simple, but has actually been something that we've noted has caused customers to have a fairly significant amount of downtime is certificates. So if you could imagine, you know, if I'm going to communicate across the internet, I need to make sure that I'm doing that in a secure way. So everything should be encrypted in transit and encrypted at rest. So one of the key factors for Ignition, and if you're using an MQTT server or anything like that, is you have to have certificates registered. And there's a couple of different ways to do this, and there's some automation and code that you can build to do this. But if you don't, getting the certificate there is fairly straightforward, but making sure someone remembers that it expires and is also taking the actions to renew that certificate and restart services, or to build the automation to have those certificates automatically renew. This is a capability that has to be built and managed and has to have a workflow process attached to it over the lifetime of that system, and is something that inside a Factory Stack is automatic. Is something that we've built and have as a capability of the platform. That means that certificates are handled as a part of the way the system is deployed and managed. And you know, that cause of downtime is something that Factory Stack customers don't have to worry about.
And I do want to add to that too, James. Thank you for that. It's that, you know, a lot of these points that we're bringing up, these are best practices for when you are developing a system both in the cloud and on-prem. And I know a part of this, you know, a point of this, you know, webinar is to really discuss what things you need to be considering as you're building your applications or looking to develop a more production-ready system that's it's aligned with the times.
Oh, and you let me start talking. Now I'm never going to stop. So this is maybe a bit of a refresher, but you know, one of the things that we think is pretty important is to talk about how NVTech and 4IR and the inductive ecosystem works. So it's kind of important to start at the base and at the center of the ecosystem, which is really Ignition. So as Esteban mentioned, there's 3 different versions of Ignition that have different purposes. I'll start with the simplest is Ignition Edge. This is used to replace HMIs on machines or to provide the capability to be a data pump. So this is not designed to speak directly to databases, but is perfect for collecting data from a bunch of different sources, building a base data model, communicating out to the cloud or to another source. It's a low cost, fast deployable, capable system of letting you access data that's difficult to get to. The next is Ignition Standard. So this is the workhorse of inductive automation. This is fully customizable with whatever modules you need to achieve the architecture that you're looking for. This can be deployed on-prem. This can be deployed in cloud. This can be deployed with different visualization types, so between perspective and vision. And fundamentally is the leaned-on tool set that we use for most use cases, be that a single Ignition server or be that a a scaled out architecture that has to have hundreds of users, attached to the system at any one time. That's, again, it's pretty much the Swiss Army knife. As Esteban mentioned, the Ignition Cloud Edition is a special version of Ignition that's not designed to talk to controllers, but what it is designed to do is to come with a set of predefined modules that allow for you to handle common use cases in the cloud. It does allow for you to do use cases that have different people from different companies attaching and viewing that. So if you are an OEM and you want to provide a dashboard to your customers, Ignition Cloud Edition is licensed to be able to do that. And then probably most importantly is you don't pay upfront for the license. You pay for the license based on the consumption of that resource over time. Okay, so the next step in the stack here is modules. So this is where partners of inductive automation have endorsed modules that are used for different purposes. So MES, and in CirrusLink's case, they are the MQTT and Cloud Injector modules. So this extends the capabilities of Ignition to be able to provide extra functions for your use case. And then on top of that is the solution. So I show the integrator logos in here because that's a lot of times who is building these solutions, but the integrator can be your own company and kind of your group of development folks inside. What's most important about the application layer is this is typically where the business value is built. So this is where the problem is solved. The application that's developed goes out and fixes whatever that problem is, or provides data for better decision making to the right people at the right time. That's all really based on whoever is building those applications. To be clear, 4IR does not build applications. We'll show you in a second what we do, but we don't build applications. So that stack on the left would have been real simple and nice, except it's not really like that, right? So when you deploy Ignition, you don't just deploy Ignition, because Ignition is really an IT-centric tool that gives you all of these additional capabilities. What you really also were doing is you also have to deploy supporting services, and you have to manage supporting services as a part of it. So the top line on the diagram really shows a couple of different databases. So 2 different relational databases and a time series database, which is useful for collecting lots of time series data, or for being the back end of your application, or providing a data store. But in general, every Ignition standard or cloud edition has a database. The next row down really talks about some of the ancillary and related services. So if you're going to do a deployment that is in the cloud or is a part of an enterprise deployment, you really do need to consider identity. Each individual user should have an individual user account so that they can be onboarded and offboarded and given specific permissions that can be auditable to ensure that the right people have access to the right parts of the application. That logo in blue is the Microsoft Entra logo, but it could be Duo or any one of a number of different identity providers that you can use for this purpose. With 4IR, we include our identity provider as a part of the service, and we set up groups on behalf of the customer to give you those security levels to use, and then we manage the users for you if it's in our tenant. The next logo is HiveMQ. This is just representative of any sort of enterprise MQTT broker. So when you go beyond, CirrusLink is a wonderful piece of software for running the broker inside of Ignition. But if you're going to be deploying across multiple regions, or you need to have a load balanced, high availability cluster of multiple, 5 or 10 or however big you need it to be, nodes of MQTT servers, that's where you get into what we call enterprise MQTT brokers. They really are specific to high volume and enterprise use cases, but they are important with Ignition when you get into really high data consumption and high data use applications. The next logo over is the Git logo. So we do include a private Git server with our systems, but more importantly is that especially with Ignition 8.3, having the ability to do version control and implementing DevOps capabilities is something that we encourage all of the people that are working with our system, and just people in general, to do. And this kind of represents the fact that that's an important design criteria. We think it's super valuable for folks to take advantage of, and something that with the latest version of Ignition just gets easier. So the next row down is some backend stuff. So that's Grafana, Prometheus, and Kubernetes. These are technologies that we use. So these are things that if you're doing this yourself and self-deploying, you really want to have observability and data collection and log filtering and and probes and potentially orchestration. These are technologies that for a lot of users in the industrial space are foreign. For folks in the IT space, they're definitely much more familiar. What we've done is we essentially have built and set up configurations for these that are optimized for Ignition and the parts of the ecosystem so that we can deliver that capability to you. On the bottom row, so the bottom row is intended to talk about other things that are a part of the ecosystem that we think are important, valuable, and related. So we have, Flow Software, HighByte. There's dozens of different logos we could have thrown into this. And we have the Tailscale logo for private connectivity. There are dozens of different applications that will often be brought in as a part of different architectures. What's important to note is that the Ignition ecosystem is that. It's an ecosystem. It's not a specifically defined set of this and that or a fixed menu. It's intended to be customized and built out to solve your specific business problems. And what we at NVTech and 4IR are offering is to help you do that in a managed, secure, and simple way.
Awesome. Thank you, James.
Awesome. Hey guys, we have a question. Do you want to cover it right now or cover it at the end? Yeah. Ivan Hernandez from Dalton, one of our integrators, goal integrators.
I think your microphone is getting really poppy here. Just letting you know.
Your audio is a bit off.
Oh, okay. Let me check it. Perhaps it's the device.
I think it's better now.
You hear me now?
Yes, perfect. Yeah.
Much better. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we have a question from Ivan, which is the engineering manager at Dalton, which is one of our premier aspiring goal integrators. And he says, how do you manage remote access to zero trust?
Yeah, so we actually this is a relatively new feature of our platform, but we have zero trust agents, and basically you would connect to. We're showing Tailscale. This is one of the two platforms that's in test right now, but basically. You would connect in with the Zero Trust client. The Kubernetes cluster case that runs it actually has a version running inside of there as well. And then we have access controls based on the application access and the user group that person is connected to. So you actually log into if Tailscale is the example, you log into Tailscale with your identity, with your common identity via Entra. That identity then grants you specific access to specific resources. So, for example, if you needed to go in and access the database that's private and up in the cloud, you would log in with the Zero Trust client, and then that Zero Trust client would provide you the access to that service in that subscription. It also works in a similar way. So we have an edge product, which is essentially taking this collection of services and deploying it down on-prem. And Straw's going to go through what that looks like. But it can be deployed inside of an industrial PC like this one behind me. This is backwards. Or it can be deployed inside of a virtual machine if you have virtual infrastructure already. And in a similar way, there is a Zero Trust client that you can use to be able to gain access to those resources as well. And that can be both granted to end users as well as to contractors using our tool.
Awesome.
Awesome. Anything else we want to cover before I move on, Esteban?
No, yeah, we have no questions at the moment. No more questions.
All right. So I do want to touch on, our services here and exactly what we try and accommodate with our platform. So you think of managed and monitored support. You think of updates and patching. You think of orchestration. So we use containerized platforms, think Docker. Basically, so we have super lightweight platforms running your applications in the cloud. that's maximizing the amount of compute that you actually have versus like running a Windows operating system. We run bare minimum, just needed and hardened to run your applications. As James had mentioned, we manage identities, we manage certificates, and we have a full disaster recovery system in place as well. Next to that, something to really touch on here is that we are partnered with inductive automation, and all of our platforms that we release, we work with them, and we have insights on vulnerabilities and things of that nature. So we're really able to provide you the best support for the Ignition platform itself. Next to that, we fully manage the database capabilities as well. And then we incorporate a time series module on our Postgres databases.
Yeah, and what we mean by that is that we provide the service. We have monitoring in place. If we had last week, someone wrote one of the nastiest recursive queries we've seen in a long time, and so we were able to notify the customer before there was any downtime, and the vendor was able to go in and correct the rogue query. So it's a level of monitoring and visibility, I'd say, that's pretty uncommon for a lot of OT deployed workloads.
And then next to that, this whole system is deployed as a platform. So we have our own internal DevOps processes for the entire deployment definition. So your databases, your Ignition system, your data brokers, everything is defined for us through code, and we can orchestrate that both in the cloud and on-premise. So that's really what Factory Stack is in a nutshell. It's providing these services. Another way to view it, you have, maybe your cloud environment, you have our cloud environment, or maybe you have an on-premise industrial computer, or you have servers on site that support virtual machines. Factory Stack sits on top of that to perform those services I had just discussed. And then your application goes on top of that. So just to hammer that point, that we don't develop applications. We partner with integrators, and we are not competitors in that field. We help supply the infrastructure, get the applications up and running in a production grade manner and system, so that you can get off the ground running and worry about developing your application, less about managing the application.
And just to be clear too, on the licensing part of that is, so 4IR doesn't sell other than Cloud Edition, just because of the nature of how that's deployed. For any Ignition licensing, you would work with NVTech. If we're working in concert, it'll be very simple for an end user to understand the licensing and module requirements and the infrastructure requirements. But yeah, we're not. We generally are not involved in the purchase of any of the Ignition licensing itself.
And we're really there as the convenient way of simplifying this deployment on site and in the cloud. So all these services, these are best practices. These are things that you'd want to do if you were deploying a system yourself, and we make it so that you don't have to worry about how that's done. We would just do that for you. I do want to touch on an example system architecture. So we're trying to keep it as basic as we can. We discussed having additional webinars to go into more detail here and how this can be done, and maybe even go into code. But this should hopefully show a way that you can connect multi-site systems together. So this is an example of an on-site system. You have your machines, your PLCs, any other controllers you have, and they're all talking to your Ignition Edge system. So I hope some of you had gotten an opportunity to work with Ignition, but it's very easy to configure connections to multiple devices and multiple protocols that are sitting out in your plant floor. Next to that, you might want to start considering getting this into the cloud. So it could be Azure, it could be AWS, and you would deploy your Ignition platform in the cloud along with your additional resources. So think on site, you don't need a lot of compute. You're doing the heavy lifting in the single region and in the cloud. You might have a dedicated broker for communications. But in general, to go from Ignition and the edge to Ignition in the cloud, it's really a couple of clicks of the button if you don't take into account the infrastructure that surrounds it. And then on top of that, if you were to go with Factory Stack, you would have our additional services. So you would have the full production grade environment in the cloud. You would have that locally. And you would have our ability to monitor these systems both for their performance, for preventative maintenance. James had mentioned earlier, we had a case where a client's database was just being hammered and it was taking up 100% of the CPU. However, the way we had configured that environment, it didn't affect their other databases. So it was a shared resource. Only that single application that had the issue was affected. And we were able to quickly help our client identify the problem and prevent it from shutting their systems down.
And maybe just quickly on this slide here on the right, we show basically a link to other cloud services. That's a pretty common use case for Factory Stack today is unified namespace and collecting of and modeling data, cleansing and creating a set of modeled data that can be used for a variety of purposes. So sometimes that's to build a dashboard or a visualization or to compare assets against each other. In other cases, it's to help build an ontology for use of AI. So, Snowflake or Palantir or other technologies that need access to this source data. That's pretty commonly what especially larger enterprises are using Factory Stack for, is to become that centralized data source for all of the manufacturing and industrial data.
Yep. Thank you, James. And to kind of touch on that, I'm only showing one factory here. You might want to start expanding. So you might want to add multiple facilities to this where, you are going to need a data warehouse or a data lake to host all your information and connect to these other external systems to enable these analytics. And, this is what that platform essentially can look like. You can have Ignition Edge on other sites. You can have Ignition Standard on other sites, and you can centralize the management of these platforms by having a cloud environment to be able to unify everything.
Yeah, from a management perspective, so as Strauss said, the two boxes on the bottom, one of them just shows Ignition Edge as an application, the other shows Ignition and a database and a broker, and you kind of pick whatever makes sense for your use case. In that scenario, we're managing on behalf of Factory Stack, we're managing the operating system and the backups and the certificates and all of that same stuff we would be managing in the cloud. We're doing the same thing within the boundaries of either that industrial PC or that virtual machine. So it's a managed service that you can use to quickly deploy and operate managed Ignition and the rest of whatever you need from that ecosystem to wherever it needs to go, provided it has an internet access. And it is an outbound only connection from the device. So there is no ports you have to open. There's no new firewall rules to allow traffic in. It essentially connects out to our fleet management server, and then we manage it from there.
I do want to, mention something that some of the challenges that Esteban had mentioned, and this is something that, would have to be configured and you have to think about this on your own. It's, how do you segregate these networks in the cloud environment? How do you divide up, what's private, what's public, how it's IP'd, how the firewalls are configured. So those are all things that you would usually have to think about when you're developing and deploying a system in the cloud. These are all things that we would take care of for you. But something to keep in mind is that while it is very easy to connect two Ignition gateways together, to set up that environment around it takes a lot more thought and planning. It could take weeks to months to figure something like this out, especially if you're newer to the cloud environment or if you're newer to the OT environment or both. And for us, our record is 7 minutes deploying a system like this. So,
wow, that's pretty quick.
Yeah, it's and we're only getting faster. We're only getting faster. That the part that takes the longest, I'm not counting, what do you want to name your web link, to Ignition, and what do you want to, how many databases you need and all that stuff. That once that design phase is done for us, it's 7 minutes to deploy.
Yeah, the nice part is that with Factory Stack, the code that actually deploys the system is common across our subscribers. And then really the unique part is your configuration of that code. So, the code that deploys Ignition, and as we move from one version of Ignition to the next, we actually verify and test Ignition with all the other componentry that's deployed, so that we can verify that when we do go to apply that update to all of our customers, or whichever customers are receiving that update, that it's been verified and tested by us before it gets there. But that's what allows for us to offer an economy of scale, is that we aren't maintaining completely segregated code bases for every one of our customers. We've built out best practices and a set of capabilities that we can then just configure to whatever the needs are for whoever's going to be deploying whatever they need.
So yeah, I think taking advantage of this part of the conversation, I wanted to go over a use case that we have a lot in our region in Latin America, which is okay. I have my Ignition deployment. It's sounding good for management. It is being successful in this plant, let's say plant A, right? So right now we want to deploy to plant B and plant C, but then it's clear that we can do something that is cohesive for something in the cloud as well, right? Mm-hmm. So what do you think should be like the first steps or considerations that this type of customer or end user should have first before moving forward, once they have a success case in one site, and then they might want to replicate, how they can start working with us? What will be some information that will be valuable to have before talking to us?
Yeah, so a lot of the conversations we get into are around application infrastructure design, right? So when you think about, am I going to build a separate application for each plant, or am I going to build one big application with different parts of it that are servicing, or one gateway with multiple applications on it? Or so if you go and you look at the Inductive website and you say, oh, well, there's scale out, there's enterprise, there's cloud, oftentimes all of them and none of them fit exactly what that use case is. So you need to really think about, and what we like to encourage people to think about is the user experience and the development experience. Is what do you want your users to see? So if, for example, you want to provide something that is uniform across the entire company, you may want to put it all through one interface and have essentially use the security of the applications themselves to segregate out the different things people want to see, and that will advise an architecture that could have multiple front end servers and multiple back end servers. Or you could say, hey, this application really we need to dedicate an Ignition system per plant, but we want to make it really consistent. So in that case, you might want to use inheritable projects, for example, to make sure common elements between those projects are inheritable, so that things like navigation and alarm displays and all of that stuff is managed as a part of that process. So that is really more of a discussion around how are we going to implement DevOps, and should we be looking at the EAM module? So those are conversations we love to have, because they really tie back into the infrastructure itself. Doesn't really need to change that much for those different scenarios, but it does matter when you're thinking about how to approach building the application, and also what things are the most important for you from an ongoing experience for both the developers and the people that are going to use that application.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah. and from other perspective, like integrators, if I'm looking into going into the cloud, learning about the cloud, sometimes it's interesting. Some people already have tried to deploy like AWS systems and stuff like that. What is the key? I know you guys have this orchestration, all of this products and services, but what would be a key phrase that you can tell an integrator, hey, we can help out in this way for you guys. So remember that path that you took with by yourself. This is how we do it. This is how we help you.
So I think there's kind of recognition of, and Stra, I don't know what you think about this, but I think there's recognition of complexity that sometimes happens. And I will give a personal example is just, I have gotten some pretty nasty bills from AWS in the past when I've configured something and set it up to log a bunch of stuff and then forgotten about it. So I think there's an entire discipline and rigor around proper, secure, cloud-based, technique and deployment and management. I think there's, certainly it's a skill set I think that a lot of folks should invest in and learn. I think a lot of our best customers are also some of the biggest experts in this, because I think they recognize that having someone that focuses in on this and is trying to be efficient with resources and upfront with support and really focusing on ensuring that this delivery is smooth and that the infrastructure part becomes somewhat forgettable. I think that's something that I think you recognize maybe when you've burned your fingers a little bit in playing with it. Stra, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I have two things. One thing is, yeah, I agree with you. It's, you don't have to worry about how to deploy the system, and how much time it's going to take, especially if you haven't done cloud before, or even locally for that matter, not having to worry about getting into the VM, setting up security in there. And it's for us, it's easy in both on site and in the cloud. The other thing though is, it's a fairly new topic for a lot of people, especially in the OT place. And we want to be there for integrators who see an opportunity to have a multi-site system, or an OEM who wants to have a fleet management capability, and to show them that, work with them on building these systems out, and really reducing some of the stresses that come with it, but also helping educate on best practices for deploying these kinds of systems. We this is our bread and butter. We do it all the time. We work with integrators all the time, work with end users all the time. And so if you have an application that you'd like to build, for us, we have sample architectures we can pull from, and really help get you to actually prove return on your investment a lot faster.
Yeah. And I would encourage that everyone out there that's in the industrial space, and if you are Ignition users, Kevin Collins on his GitHub page has a tremendous set of examples, running things in containers and setting up complex architectures and understanding how to manage pre-configuration and YAML files. These are all concepts that they're becoming more and more a part of the OT environment. And understanding a little more about that complexity, but also what that value can be. I think the days are gone of building a system, putting it in a closet, and forgetting it for 10 years. My hair's gray enough that that's what it used to be, and that has proven to be dangerous from a security perspective, but also really not sustainable from a management perspective. And I think trying to solve for that, I think is really what 4IR was built for.
Yeah, in particular nowadays, James, when you have an MES system that needs to talk to your business system, and oftentimes your business systems are going to be over in the cloud. So now you are talking to a system, potentially even bridging over the internet, hopefully not, that can introduce more vulnerabilities into a typically isolated environment. So that it's another reason why you want to keep things up to date, and that having just pure isolated environments is no longer the answer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and guys, we have a question that when will your platform be updated to Ignition 8.3, if it isn't already, right? And what do you think could be the most relevant improvements for factories in your factory stack with Ignition 8.3?
So we were super excited about the features of 8.3 because some of the coding gymnastics we've gone through for to make 8.1 sing the way it does were unideal. So our intention is to support 8.3. I don't know if it'll be exactly at release, maybe a little delayed from that, but as soon as humanly possible, because there's definite value as a part of that. We are going to be giving a presentation at ICC this year that's going to talk about production-ready ignition systems. So we do plan to highlight a bunch of 8.3 features and how those play into, you know, if you remember that slide that had the production-ready systems on one side, we really want to highlight how 8.3 helps with that and what features we see as being the most valuable. I would say just off the cuff, deployment modes we think is pretty important, and that really allowing for, you know, things like hooking up to secrets management and having different configurations based on what the role of that system is for deployment. All of the configuration and tags moving to the file system makes implementation of Git super useful. And then from a customer perspective, we have a lot of folks that do integration with third-party systems like Kafka and Snowflake and a variety of others. So, you know, the streaming capabilities, I think, are going to be really heavily used. It's not so much, you know, a huge impact for how we do the deployment, but those are things that I think are going to get pretty heavily utilized.
They're very excited for 8.3.
Yeah, I told Toby once that one of my like biggest wow moment or interest moments was the event streams publication. Like when they released the idea of doing that module, it was really interesting for data handling. Right, it's a totally different game from what we have right now with Ignition. So I think it's going to be really exciting for that type of integration. I want to thank Giovanni and Ivan for commenting on our chat. If you guys have any questions afterwards, we're going to leave this posted on our YouTube channel, on our LinkedIn and Facebook. Just note that in Facebook, it will get put down because Facebook has new rules apparently. But yeah, it just lives like 30 days. So you can always come to... Yeah,
and we can't sing any proprietary music either, right? So like no.
Yeah, I was about to put some Ozzy Osbourne at some point, but yeah, I couldn't. Anyhow, yeah. So let's thank you for attending our stream. I hope you really liked it. We had a very interesting audience on numbers, and I am looking forward for uploading our Spanish audio track. We are using AI for this, so I hope you guys enjoy it as well. We're doing some technology for a technology session, so it's good. It's great. It was great talking to you guys as well, James and Sarah, and hopefully we will do more of this type of content.
Yeah, looking forward. Awesome. Thank you, Esteban.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks everyone. And so I'll stop the stream right now.